Toledo, California. One of the greatest crowds in the West gathers to witness the launching of a Liberty ship. There is something about this crowd, as there is about this ship, that is different from any other. Something you cannot see, yet something that all who are assembled here can feel. The presence of an unseen, yet vital personality. For the name of this ship is Jack London. Never was a Liberty ship more fittingly named. The fearless spirit and purpose of the man lives again in every member of its crew and invests the ship itself with true significance. For Jack London was more than a great author. He was a real American. He lived and wrote that others might be free. Free to read the truth. Free to right a wrong. Free to raise their voices on behalf of the welfare of their fellow men.
John Griffith Cheney, January the 12th, 1876 to November 22nd, 1916, better known as Jack London, was an American novelist, journalist and activist, a pioneer of commercial fiction and American magazines. He was one of the first American authors to become an international celebrity and earn a large fortune from writing. He was also an innovator in the genre that would later become known as science fiction. You can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club. London was part of the radical literary group The Crowd in San Francisco and a passionate advocate of animal welfare and workers' rights. London wrote several works dealing with these topics, such as his dystopian novel The Iron Heel, his non-fiction exposé The People of the Abyss, War of the Classes and Before Adam. His most famous works include The Call of the Wild and White Fang, both set in Alaska and the Yukon during the Klondike Gold Rush, as well as the short stories To Build a Fire, An Odyssey of the North and Love of Life. He also wrote about the South Pacific in stories such as The Pearls of Parley and The Heathen. I would rather be a superb meteor, every atom of me in magnificent glow, than a sleepy and permanent planet.
Come on, all of you. Everybody back to work. Hey, London, you too. Come on, get back to work or you won't have a job.
London was born near 3rd and Brannan Streets in San Francisco. The house burned down in the fire after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The California Historical Society placed a plaque at the site in 1953. Although the family was working class, it was not as impoverished as London's later accounts claimed. I'd rather sing one wild song and burst my heart with it than live 1,000 years watching my digestion and being afraid of the wet. London was largely self-educated. In 1885, London found and read Ouida's long Victorian novel Signa. He credited this as the seed of his literary success. In 1886, he went to the Oakland Public Library and found a sympathetic librarian, Ina Coolbrith, who encouraged his learning. She later became California's first poet laureate and an important figure in the San Francisco literary community. The wild still lingered in him, and the wolf in him merely slept. In 1889, London began working 12 to 18 hours a day at Hickmont's cannery. Seeking a way out, he borrowed money from his foster mother, Virginia Prentice, bought the sloop Razzle Dazzle from an oyster pirate named French Frank, and became an oyster pirate himself. In his memoir, John Barleycorn, he claims also to have stolen French Frank's mistress, Mammy. After a few months, his sloop became damaged beyond repair. London hired on as a member of the California Fish Patrol.
180, 200, 220, 5 makes 225.
And you get bargain, Monsieur. I tell you straight, I hate to give her up, but I got chance to buy bigger boat.
I've had my eye on her for a long time. I've been a fool working in those jute mills and canning factories.
Well, come on, let's wet down the deal, all right? Oh, Mamie, get your stuff off that boat. Meet me on the Reindeer. You know, you're gonna like that boat. Good boat.
I would rather be ashes than dust. I would rather that my spark should burn out in a brilliant blaze than it should be stifled by dry rot. I would rather be a superb meteor, every atom of me in magnificent glow, than a sleepy and permanent planet. The function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days trying to prolong them. I shall use my time. He was mastered by the sheer surging of life, the tidal wave of being, the perfect joy of each separate muscle, joint and sinew, in that it was everything that was not death, that it was aglow and rampant, expressing itself in movement, flying exultantly under the stars. Deep in the forest a call was sounding, and as often as he heard this call, mysteriously thrilling and luring, he felt compelled to turn his back upon the fire and the beaten earth around it, and to plunge into the forest, and on and on. He knew not where or why, nor did he wonder where or why, the call sounding imperiously deep in the forest.
Hello.
What are you doing here?
Fell asleep below. You going in with French Frank?
What's that got to do with you?
Nothing. Only there's an awful lot to learn about oyster pirates.
Life is not always a matter of holding good cards, but sometimes playing a poor hand well. In 1893, he signed on to the sealing schooner Sophie Sutherland, bound for the coast of Japan. When he returned, the country was in the grip of the Panic of '93, and Oakland was swept by labour unrest. After grueling jobs in a jute mill and a street railway power plant, London joined Coxey's army and began his career as a tramp. In 1894, he spent 30 days for vagrancy in the Erie County Penitentiary at Buffalo, New York. In The Road, he wrote, "Manhandling was merely one of the very minor, unprintable horrors of the Erie County Pen. I say unprintable, and in justice I must also say undescribable. They were unthinkable to me until I saw them, and I was no spring chicken in the ways of the world and the awful abysses of human degradation. It would take a deep plummet to reach bottom in the Erie County pen, and I do but skim lightly and facetiously the surface of things as I there saw them. Jack London, The Road. After many experiences as a hobo and a sailor, he returned to Oakland and attended Oakland High School. He contributed a number of articles to the high school's magazine, The Aegis. His first published work was Typhoon Off the Coast of Japan, an account of his sailing experiences. London left Oakland with a social conscience and socialist leanings. He concluded that his only hope of escaping the work trap was to get an education and sell his brains. He saw his writing as a business, his ticket out of poverty, and he hoped as a means of beating the wealthy at their own game. On returning to California in 1898, London began working to get published, a struggle described in his novel Martin Eden, serialized in 1908, published in 1909. His first published story since high school was To the Man on Trail, which has frequently been collected in anthologies. When the Overland Monthly offered him only $5 for it and was slow paying, London came close to abandoning his writing career. In his words, literally and literally, I was saved when the Black Cat accepted his story, 1,000 Deaths, and paid him $40, the first money I ever received for a story. London began his writing career just as new printing technologies enabled lower cost production of magazines. This resulted in a boom in popular magazines aimed at a wide public audience and a strong market for short fiction. In 1900, he made $2,500 in writing, about $92,000 in today's currency. Among the works he sold to magazines was a short story known as either Diable, 1902, or Batard, 1904, two editions of the same basic story. London received $141.25 for this story on May 27th, 1902. In the text, a cruel French Canadian brutalizes his dog, and the dog retaliates and kills the man. London told some of his critics that man's actions are the main cause of the behavior of their animals, and he would show this famously in another story, The Call of the Wild.
You leave me alone? You leave me alone? You leave me alone?
Don't loaf and invite inspiration. Light out after it with a club. In early 1903, London sold The Call of the Wild to the Saturday Evening Post for $750 and the book rights to Macmillan. Macmillan's promotional campaign propelled it to swift success. The crowd gathered at the restaurants, including Copa's at the Old Montgomery Block, and later was a bohemian group that often spent its Sunday afternoons picnicking, reading each other's latest compositions, gossiping about each other's infidelities, and frolicking beneath the cherry boughs in the hills of Piedmont. Courtesy Alex Kershaw, historian.
Buck, where does all that snow come from? And why? Does snow a man in all winter? Keep him from his purpose? Frozen handcuffs. See, there's an idea for you. A man commits a crime, evades the police, and escapes to the Yukon. Gets snowed in. And spends the whole winter in solitary confinement. Oh, don't like it, huh? Not good. Well, maybe you're right. Well, let's light the lamp and spend a cozy evening working. Now, if you're a good fellow, I'll let you in on the last 2 chapters I wrote. Remember where we left off last night? Right in the middle of the big fight. Well, listen to this. In vain, Buck strove to sink his teeth in the neck of the big white dog. He clashed fang and lips were cut and bleeding, but Buck could not penetrate his enemy's guard. Time and time again he tried for the snow-white throat, where life bubbled near to the surface. Where life bubbled near to the surface. Not a bad phrase, that. What do you say? Hey, you, Buck. Wake up. Aren't you even interested in hearing about yourself? Ah, you're a lazy dog. Say, where did you get that terrible scar? That must have ripped you wide open. I would have liked you must have let Buck. If you could only speak, what stories you could tell. What a collaborator you'd be.
A lot of money. I want to go in the boat. You want to go on the other sea. Hey, you take a lot of money. See? You have the money, huh? Money. The other sea, huh? What?
A vast silence reigned over the land. The land itself was a desolation, lifeless, without movement, so lone and cold that the spirit of it was not even that of sadness. There was a hint in it of laughter, but of laughter more terrible than any sadness, a laughter that was mirthless as the smile of the Sphinx, a laughter cold as the frost and partaking of the grimness of infallibility. It was the masterful and incommunicable wisdom of eternity laughing at the futility of life and the effort of life. It was the wild, the savage, frozen-hearted Northland wild. "Who are you, Martin Eden?" he demanded of himself in the looking glass. That night, when he got back to his room, he gazed at himself long and curiously. "Who are you? What are you? Where do you belong? You belong by rights to girls like Lizzie Connolly. You belong with the legions of toil, with all that is low and vulgar and unbeautiful. You belong with the oxen and the drudges, in dirty surroundings among smells and stenches. There are the stale vegetables now. Those potatoes are rotting. Smell them. Damn you, smell them. And yet you dare to open the books, to listen to beautiful music, to learn to love beautiful paintings, to speak good English, to think thoughts that none of your own kind thinks, to tear yourself away from the oxen and the Lizzie Connollys, and to love a pale spirit of a woman who is 1,000,000 miles beyond you and who lives in the stars. Who are you? And what are you? Damn you. And are you going to make good? intelligent men are cruel. Stupid men are monstrously cruel. London died November 22nd, 1916, in a sleeping porch in a cottage on his ranch. London had been a robust man, but had suffered several serious illnesses, including scurvy in the Klondike. Additionally, during travels on the Snark, he and Charmian picked up unspecified tropical infections and diseases, including yours. At the time of his death, he suffered from dysentery, late-stage alcoholism, and uremia. He was in extreme pain and taking morphine and opium, both common over-the-counter drugs at the time. There is an ecstasy that marks the summit of life, and beyond which life cannot rise, and such is the paradox of living. This ecstasy comes when one is most alive, and it comes as a complete forgetfulness that one is alive. This ecstasy, this forgetfulness of living, comes to the artist caught up and out of himself in a sheet of flame. It comes to the soldier war-mad in a stricken field and refusing quarter, and it came to Buck, leading the pack, sounding the old wolf cry, straining after the food that was alive and that fled swiftly before him through the moonlight. London's ashes were buried on his property not far from the Wolf House. London's funeral took place on November 26, 1916, attended only by close friends, relatives and workers of the property. In accordance with his wishes, he was cremated and buried next to some pioneer children under a rock that belonged to the Wolf House. After Charmian's death in 1955, she was also cremated and then buried with her husband in the same spot that her husband chose. The grave is marked by a mossy boulder. The buildings and property were later preserved as Jack London State Historic Park in Glen Ellen, California. But especially he loved to run in the dim twilight of the summer midnights, listening to the subdued and sleepy murmurs of the forest, reading signs and sounds as a man may read a book, and seeking for the mysterious something that called, waking or sleeping at all times, for him to come.
I knew it when I first met you. Remember what I told you?
About a ship in the sea. I'll always remember.
When a man and woman are meant for each other, like a ship new launched, they rush to the sea. The sliding waves rebel, but neither sea nor ship hear them, as they rush into each other's lives.